Walls of marble, miles of shelves, 1,200 years of secrets. Deep beneath Vatican City sits the world's most guarded collection of documents, 85 kilometers of shelving holding papers that could rewrite history. We're talking about the Vatican Apostolic Archives, formerly called the Secret Archives until 2019. 53 miles of mysteries that even today leave historians scratching their heads. From missing knights, to vanished girls, to devices that shouldn't exist, these 12 cases prove that some Vatican secrets refuse to stay buried. Each one documented, each one unexplained. If you value documented Viking and Norse-era history, like this, subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you're hearing this from. This script is researched and factual, using sources from Vatican archival records and peer-reviewed archaeological studies. Now back to the story. Number 1. The Lost Chinon Parchment, 2001, Vatican Archives. 60 meters of medieval parchment containing the complete trial records of the Knights Templar, lost for nearly 400 years. The document proved Pope Clement V actually absolved the Templars of heresy in 1308, 3 years before officially dissolving the order under pressure from France's King Philip IV. Here's the twist. It was sitting in the wrong filing box since 1628. Archaeologist Barbara Frail stumbled across it while researching something else entirely. The parchment measures the size of a dining room table and contains 231 depositions from Chinon castle interrogations between August 17th and 20th, 1308. 3 papal cardinals, Béranger Frédol, Etienne de Suisy, and Landolfo Brancaccio, conducted the secret hearings. Grand Master Jacques de Molay and 71 other Templars confessed to spitting on the cross and denying Christ, but only under extreme torture by King Philip's agents. The papal transcript shows Pope Clement's private absolution ceremony at Poitiers in July 1308. One inscription reads simply, "Absolved." Yet 4 years later, Clement publicly disbanded the order anyway. The revelation rehabilitated the entire Templar legacy overnight. But historians can't explain how such a massive document, essentially proof of the Templars' innocence, could vanish from all records and scholarly attention for centuries. Vatican filing systems show no record of the document being moved or misfiled. No archivist left notes explaining its displacement. The French Royal Archives contain a different version of these same trials, but comparison reveals significant discrepancies, suggesting deliberate falsification of the French copy. Number 2. The chronovisor device, 1960s, undisclosed Vatican. Location. Father Pellegrino Ernetti, respected priest and scientist from Venice, claimed he helped develop a machine that could view past events like television. According to Ernetti, the device allowed him to witness Christ's crucifixion and even photograph it. He published the photo in an Italian magazine called La Domenica del Corriere in May 1972, under the headline, "A machine that photographs the past has finally been invented." The Vatican allegedly confiscated the device immediately, realizing its world-changing implications. Ernetti maintained his story until his death in 1994, describing technical details about electromagnetic radiation and chronovibrational energy that he claimed could capture residual electromagnetic imprints of past events. The machine allegedly stood 12 feet tall with a complex array of antennae and required a team of 12 scientists to operate, including Nobel Prize winner Enrico Fermi. Ernetti claimed this device could tune into historical moments with precision, Napoleon's battles, the founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus, even a performance of the lost Greek tragedy Thyestes by Quintus Ennius. The crucifixion photograph showed a bearded figure on a cross with the inscription INRI visible above. However, skeptics later identified striking similarities to a wooden sculpture of Christ created by Spanish artist Colot Valera in 1941. Ernetti dismissed these comparisons, insisting his photograph predated the sculpture's public exhibition. No trace of the device has ever been found in Vatican inventories, despite multiple Freedom of Information requests from journalists. Church officials deny its existence entirely, calling Ernetti's claims pure fantasy. Yet Ernetti's credentials remain unquestioned. Musical scholar specializing in Gregorian chant, biblical expert fluent in ancient Greek and Hebrew, licensed exorcist who performed over 400 documented cases. The mystery deepens with reports that multiple scientists worked on the project, all bound by Vatican secrecy oaths. Brazilian physicist Cesar Lattes allegedly collaborated on electromagnetic components. Italian electronics engineer Professor Gemelli reportedly designed the viewing apparatus. All participants died without confirming or denying involvement. Trust me. Subscribe. Number 3. The Third Secret of Fatima, 1917-2000, Vatican Apostolic Archives. 3 Portuguese children, Lucia dos Santos, age 10, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, aged 9 and 7, received visions from the Virgin Mary on May 13, 1917, near the town of Fatima. The apparitions continued monthly through October, witnessed by crowds reaching 70,000 people during the final Miracle of the Sun event. 2 secrets were revealed publicly: visions of hell showing a sea of fire with demons and souls in torment, and prophecy of World War II ending with Russia's conversion to Christianity. The 3rd secret remained sealed in Vatican vaults for 83 years. Sister Lucia wrote it down in 1943 on a single sheet of paper, sealing it in an envelope with instructions not to open until 1960, when it will appear clearer. The Vatican ignored the deadline completely. Cardinal Alfredo Ottaviani stated in 1960 the secret would remain forever under absolute seal. Public pressure mounted for decades, especially after the 1981 assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. Cardinal Angelo Sedano finally released the secret on May 13, 2000, exactly 83 years after the original vision. The Vatican version described a bishop dressed in white climbing a mountain of corpses and being shot by soldiers with arrows and bullets. Vatican officials connected this to the shooting of John Paul II in St. Peter's Square. Problem is, multiple Vatican experts believe the released version was incomplete or deliberately altered. The original text reportedly contained 4 pages, but only 1 was released. Church historian Father Malachi Martin claimed he read the actual secret in the 1960s and called it insufferable and catastrophic for the Church. Martin hinted the real secret involved massive apostasy within Church leadership, saying a good portion of the Catholic hierarchy would defect from the true faith. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict XVI, described the unreleased portions as involving the dangers threatening the faith and life of the Christian and therefore of the world. Multiple Vatican insiders have confirmed the released text was sanitized. Archbishop Giovanni Benelli reportedly told close associates the real secret predicted the smoke of Satan entering the sanctuary and widespread corruption among church officials. The timing of the 2000 release, during the peak of the Catholic abuse crisis, raised additional suspicions among Vatican observers. Sister Lucia herself died in 2005 without ever publicly confirming whether the released version matched what she originally wrote. Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone, Vatican Secretary of State, claimed in 2007 that no other parts of the secret existed, but internal Vatican communications suggest otherwise. Number 4. The Vatican Necropolis Mystery, 1939-1950, beneath St. Peter's Basilica. Workers digging a tomb for Pope Pius X in December 1939 broke through the floor and discovered empty space below. What followed was a decade-long archaeological excavation that uncovered an entire ancient Roman cemetery. The Vatican necropolis spans multiple levels: 1st century pagan burial grounds with small clay repositories, 5th century combined, pagan and Christian mausoleums, and a complex network of 22 excavated tombs. Archaeologists found exactly 120 burials in Mausoleum F alone, with at least 170 more in Mausoleum H. Conservative estimates suggest over 1,000 total burials across the site, reflecting high infant mortality rates in 2nd century Rome. The mausoleums belonged to wealthy Roman families: Marcus Abusius Charito, Lucius Volusius Successus, and the Julii family, whose tomb dates to the 3rd century. At the center lies what Vatican experts call the Trophy of Gaius, a shrine built around 160 AD that early church writer Gaius claimed marked St. Peter's burial spot. The monument consists of a simple niche carved into a wall, flanked by columns and topped with a small roof. Adjacent to this monument stands the infamous graffiti wall, covered with hundreds of Latin inscriptions left by early Christian pilgrims. Names, prayers, and invocations to Peter cover every available surface. In a marble-lined niche within this wall, archaeologist Ludwig Kaas discovered human bones in 1942. Vatican archaeologist Margherita Guarducci spent 20 years analyzing the site and claimed these were St. Peter's remains, moved here during Constantine's Basilica construction in 330 AD. She pointed to specific inscriptions, including Peter, Ni, and Petre Roga Christu, as evidence of Peter's presence. Antonio Ferrua, the Jesuit priest who led the excavation, remained deeply skeptical, calling Guarducci's interpretations wishful thinking. The bones belonged to an elderly, robust man approximately 60 to 70 years old, consistent with Peter's estimated age at death. But scientific analysis proved inconclusive. No definitive dating was possible with 1940s technology. Pope Paul VI declared in 1968 that Peter's relics had been identified in a convincing manner, but scholars noted the careful diplomatic language avoided claiming absolute certainty. The Vatican has never permitted independent archaeological teams to examine the site. Carbon dating of the bones could resolve age questions, but hasn't been authorized. Modern imaging techniques could reveal hidden inscriptions on the graffiti wall, but access remains restricted. The site receives only 200 visitors per day in groups of 12, making comprehensive study nearly impossible. Number 5. The Pope, Joan Records Gap, 9th century, complete absence from Vatican archives. Medieval chroniclers across Europe documented a female pope who allegedly reigned from 853 to 855 AD. The most detailed account came from Dominican friar Martin of Trapao in 1265, who placed Johannes Anglicus on the papal throne between Pope Leo IV and Pope Benedict III. According to multiple independent sources spanning centuries, this pope gave birth during a procession from St. Peter's to the Lateran Basilica, exposing her gender to horrified crowds watching from windows and doorways. The story was accepted without question in Catholic circles for over 400 years. Medieval church historians like Anastasius Bibliothecarius, Jean de Melly, and Stephen Oath of Bourbon all recorded versions of the female pope tale. Bartolomeo Platina, Vatican librarian under Pope Sixtus IV, included Pope Joan in his official papal biography series published in 1479. The legend persisted through multiple papal reigns until Protestant reformers began using it for anti-Catholics propaganda during the Reformation. Only then did the Vatican begin systematically denying the story's authenticity. Here's what historians can explain. There are absolutely no contemporary records from the 9th century documenting any such event anywhere in Europe. Papal correspondence, which normally included multiple copies sent to bishops across Christendom, contains no references to a female pope. Church records show Pope Leo IV dying in July 855 and Benedict III being elected immediately afterward, with no gap for another pontificate. Yet the documentation void itself raises serious questions. Medieval papal records from the 9th and 10th centuries are notably sparse compared to later periods when papal bureaucracy expanded. Entire years of papal correspondence simply don't exist in Vatican archives. The Liber Pontificalis, the official papal chronicle, shows unusual editing, marks and corrections around entries for Leo IV and Benedict III, suggesting possible later alterations. Some Vatican documents from this chaotic period disappeared entirely during the multiple sacks of Rome, the papal moves to Avignon, and the Western Schism confusion. Proponents of the Pope Joan theory argue this represents deliberate suppression of embarrassing evidence. They point to later papal procedures requiring physical examination of new popes, allegedly instituted after the Joan incident. Critics note the 400-year gap between alleged events and first written accounts makes verification impossible. The Vatican's official position remains complete dismissal. Pope Joan is pure medieval fiction. But they've never satisfactorily explained why respected medieval chroniclers, many writing specifically for church patrons, would fabricate such a potentially damaging story. Multiple independent sources across different countries and centuries recorded similar details, suggesting either a remarkably consistent lie or some basis in historical fact. Number 6. Napoleon's lost documents, 1810-1815, gaps in papal correspondence. Napoleon Bonaparte ordered the entire Vatican archive transferred to Paris in 1809 as part of his plan to create a Central European archive under French control. The operation took 4 years to complete. Over 3,000 wooden crates shipped, north by cart and boat, containing 8 centuries of papal documents dating back to the 8th century. The archives filled multiple buildings within the National Archives complex on the grounds of the Hôtel de Soubise. French archivists spent 6 years cataloging the Vatican materials, discovering documents they claimed proved papal corruption and abuse of power. When Napoleon fell in 1815, Pope Pius VII negotiated the return of Vatican property under the Treaty of Paris. Most documents made the journey back to Rome between 1815 and 1817, but significant gaps became apparent immediately. Vatican archivists, led by Cardinal Angelo Mai, discovered that specific papal registers from the 11th and 12th centuries never made it back. Multiple diplomatic correspondence files remained in French hands, including crucial letters between medieval popes and Holy Roman emperors. Some documents were deliberately retained by French scholars like Jean-Baptiste Pitre, who claimed historical importance overrode Vatican ownership. Others were simply lost during the chaotic transportation across war-torn Europe. The return process was complicated by documents from competing papal claimants during the Western Schism. Archives from Avignon and Pisan antipopes weren't fully reunited with Roman materials until 1784, 31 years after the last rival pope died. Archives from the 14th century papal court at Avignon had been stored separately in French royal libraries since 1377. These were only partially returned, with French officials claiming many documents were too damaged for transport. The missing documents create massive black holes in papal history, spanning critical periods of church-state conflict. Historians studying medieval investiture controversies face incomplete correspondence between popes and emperors. Entire papal bulls, referenced in other documents, simply don't exist in Vatican collections. Modern estimates suggest the Vatican lost approximately 15% of their pre-1300 documentation during the Napoleonic period. Requests to France for remaining documents have been met with bureaucratic delays spanning 2 centuries. The Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris acknowledges holding some Vatican materials, but has never provided a complete inventory. French officials claim many documents were damaged beyond recovery or destroyed during World War II bombing raids. Number 7. The Galileo trial theft, 1843. Partial return of stolen Vatican documents. The complete trial records of Galileo. Galilei for heresy disappeared from Vatican archives during the Napoleonic occupation of Rome. French Comte Pierre Louis-Jean Casimir de Blacas deliberately stole them from the Paris archive complex between 1810 and 1815 while serving as Napoleon's cultural administrator. The documents included Galileo's original handwritten defense, complete Inquisition interrogation transcripts, expert testimony from Jesuit astronomers, and the final sentencing decree signed by Pope Urban VIII. The stolen materials remained, hidden in de Blacas' private collection at his estate in Provence for 28 years. His widow, Henriette de Boucher de Sourches, finally returned them to the Vatican in 1843 following diplomatic pressure from Pope Gregory XVI. But Vatican. Archivists immediately discovered the returned documents were incomplete and showed signs of tampering. Key testimonies from pro-Galileo witnesses had been removed entirely. Specific Inquisition procedures documenting torture threats were missing. The actual sentencing document contained suspicious ink variations and word substitutions. Most crucially, Galileo's private correspondence with Cardinal Robert Bellarmine defending heliocentrism was absent from the returned collection. Vatican officials noted major discrepancies between their internal summaries from the 1630s and the documents returned in 1843. Some scholars believe de Blacas made copies of the most damaging materials before return, explaining how Protestant historians like Leopold von Ranke gained detailed knowledge of church persecution methods before Vatican archives opened to researchers in 1881. The theft created lasting uncertainty about the complete historical record of one of history's most famous trials. Modern scholars studying the Galileo affair must work with potentially compromised source material. Critical questions remain unanswered. Did Galileo actually recant his scientific beliefs, or was this added to the record later? Were torture threats real or theoretical? What private deals existed between Galileo and church officials? Vatican. Archivists have never publicly acknowledged which specific documents were missing from the returned collection, making verification impossible. Recent investigations using ultraviolet photography have revealed traces of erased text in multiple trial documents, but the Vatican hasn't permitted comprehensive analysis. Number 8. The Emanuela Orlandi vanishing, June 22, 1983. Vatican City citizen disappeared without trace. 15-year-old Emanuela Orlandi, daughter of Vatican Bank employee Ercole Orlandi, vanished after attending flute lessons at the Sant'Apollinare Music School near Piazza Navona in Rome. Her last confirmed sighting was at 7 p.m. boarding the 64 bus toward Vatican City. A witness reported seeing a girl matching Orlandi's description entering a green BMW near the music school, but the lead went nowhere. Within days, anonymous phone calls began reaching the Orlandi family claiming terrorist connections. A man identifying himself as the American demanded the release of Mehmet Ali Aka, the Turkish terrorist who shot Pope John Paul II in St. Peter's Square on May 13, 1981, exactly 2 years before Orlandi's disappearance. 16 separate. Calls came from different public telephones across Rome over 3 weeks. Callers provided specific details about Orlandi's appearance and personal items to prove they held her. They demanded direct contact with Cardinal Agostino Casaroli, Vatican Secretary of State, and threatened to kill the girl if Aka wasn't freed within 20 days. Vatican officials installed a special telephone line on July 18th as requested, but negotiations failed. Investigation by Italian police revealed the terrorism angle was complete misdirection designed to cover the real motive. No Middle Eastern terrorist group ever claimed responsibility. Aka himself later claimed from prison that Bulgarian secret services orchestrated the calls as part of Soviet disinformation to link him to the Grey Wolves terrorist organization. Former East German Stasi agent Günter Bonsack confirmed in DSI 2008 that Operation Pope involved fake letters and phone calls designed to muddy waters around the papal assassination attempt. Real motives for Orlandi's disappearance remain completely unknown after 40 years and multiple investigations. Vatican police, Italian magistrates, parliamentary commissions, and independent prosecutors have all failed to solve the case. No arrests, no body, no resolution. Pope Francis told the Orlandi family in 2013 that Emanuela is in heaven, implying direct knowledge of her death. Vatican officials maintain they know nothing, but internal documents suggest otherwise. Father Gabriele Amorth, Vatican chief exorcist, appointed by Pope John Paul II himself, publicly accused Vatican officials of involvement. This was a crime with a sexual motive, Amorth insisted in 2012. Parties were organized, with the Vatican, a gendarme acting as the recruiter of girls. The network involved diplomatic personnel from a foreign embassy to the Holy See. Recent DNA testing of bone fragments found in Vatican cemeteries and Rome crypts proved negative for Orlandi matches. The Orlandi family continues demanding answers, organizing annual demonstrations in St. Peter's Square. Pietro Orlandi, Emanuela's brother, has spent 4 decades investigating independently, uncovering connections between Vatican finances, Italian organized crime, and intelligence services. Multiple informants have provided conflicting stories about Orlandi's fate: accidental death during a party, deliberate murder to silence witnesses, trafficking to other countries. None have been verified. Number 9. The Penniless Conclave Mystery. January 1922, Vatican treasury found completely empty. Pope Benedict XV died suddenly on January 22, 1922, from pneumonia complications. Cardinal Camerlengo Giuseppe Meri Del Val opened the papal safe to access traditional funds for organizing the conclave to elect a new pope. He found the treasury literally empty. No coins, banknotes, or negotiable securities remained. Benedict XV had apparently emptied Vatican finances through lavish spending during World War I and poor fiscal management throughout his 8-year pontificate. The discovery created an unprecedented crisis. Papal conclaves required substantial funding, housing and feeding 61 cardinals from around the world, securing the Sistine Chapel, paying Swiss guards overtime, and covering ceremonial expenses. The Holy See faced complete bankruptcy at the precise moment they needed significant cash flow. Encrypted telegrams discovered in 2024 show Vatican Secretary of State Pietro Gasparri urgently requesting emergency funds from Archbishop Giovanni Bonzano in Washington. The cables, marked Urgentissimo, begged for whatever you have in the safe to prevent postponing the papal election. European economies remained devastated from World War I, making local borrowing impossible. Italian banks refused Vatican credit due to ongoing disputes over papal sovereignty. Benedict XV's financial records show unusual patterns of expenditure that Vatican accountants couldn't explain. Large payments to unnamed recipients, mysterious transfers to Swiss accounts, substantial donations to charitable organizations that couldn't be verified. Some historians believe Benedict secretly funded White Russian forces fighting Bolsheviks, draining papal resources in failed attempts to restore the Tsarist regime. Others suggest money went to German Catholic organizations supporting resistance to the new Weimar Republic. The American embassy in Rome responded to Gaspari's plea by wiring exactly 210 409ers, including cents, collected from American Catholic Church's weekly collections. This last-minute infusion allowed the conclave that elected Pope Pius VIII on February 6, 1922, after 14 ballots. The precise amount suggests American Catholics had been systematically saving for Vatican support, indicating prior knowledge of financial problems. Vatican records show the American contribution was never repaid, despite multiple papal promises. This emergency funding established a pattern of American financial dependence that continues today. Over 60% of Vatican operating expenses now come from American Catholic donations. The mystery deepens with discovery of a second safe in Benedict XV's private apartments, found welded shut after his death. Vatican officials have never publicly revealed its contents, or explained why Benedict maintained secret financial accounts separate from official papal treasury. Number 10. The Western Schism Archive. Chaos, 1378-1417, competing papal archives never fully reconciled. The Great Western Schism created 2 rival papal courts, one in Rome under Urban VI, one in Avignon under Clement VII. Each pope maintained completely separate archives and documentation systems, creating parallel papal records for 39 years. The situation worsened in 1409, when the Council of Pisa elected a third pope, Alexander III, creating 3 simultaneous papal archives across Europe. Each court claimed exclusive legitimacy and refused to recognize documents from rival papacies. The Roman line included an Urban VI, Boniface IX, Innocent VII, and Gregory XII. The Avignon line continued with Clement V and Benedict XIII. The Pisan line added Alexander V and John Louis III. All issued bulls, appointed bishops, granted indulgences, and conducted diplomatic correspondence as if they were sole legitimate popes. The schism ended in 1417 when the Council of Constance elected Martin V as universally recognized pope, but reuniting the dispersed archives took centuries. Documents remained scattered across Europe in different repositories: Rome, Avignon, Pisa, and various royal libraries that had supported different papal claimants. Some archives were deliberately destroyed by losing papal factions to prevent rival claims. Others disappeared entirely during the chaos of concurrent excommunications and political warfare. Vatican archivists worked until 1784, 367 years later, to recover dispersed papal documents from the schism period. Even then, massive gaps remained permanent. Correspondence between rival papal courts was often deliberately suppressed or destroyed to avoid embarrassing evidence of church division. Multiple papal letters exist with conflicting dates and contradictory authorization, creating scholarly nightmares for medieval historians. Some documents show clear evidence of retroactive alterations to support the eventual Roman winner's legitimacy claims. The Avignon archives suffered particular damage during French revolutionary confiscations in the 1790s. Spanish archives containing Pisan papal documents were lost during the Napoleonic Wars. English royal libraries held correspondence with different papal claimants, but returned only selected materials that supported British diplomatic interests. Modern historians studying church governance during this crucial period face fundamentally incomplete records. Questions about papal authority, episcopal appointments, and doctrinal decisions remain unanswered due to missing documentation. The Vatican has never released a complete inventory of which documents were permanently lost during the schism chaos, making comprehensive historical analysis impossible. Number 11. The Pius XIII. Silence Files, 1939-1958. Wartime popes documented reluctance to condemn Nazi atrocities. Pope Francis opened Pius XV's archives ahead of schedule in March 2020, allowing historians unprecedented access to previously classified documents from the controversial wartime pontificate. The papers contain over 16 million pages, spanning Pius XV's entire reign from 1939 to 1958. Documents confirm Vatican knowledge of Holocaust atrocities as early as 1942, through detailed reports from bishops across occupied Europe. Internal memos show systematic information reaching the papal office about mass killings of Jews, Poles, and other civilians. Cardinal Luigi Maglione's daily briefings to Pius X included specific details about concentration camps, death trains, and killing methods. Reports came from multiple sources. Archbishop Angelo Rota in Budapest, describing deportations, Bishop Konrad von Preysing in Berlin, documenting Kristallnacht aftermath, and Apostolic Nuncio Aloisi Masella, providing eyewitness accounts from France. Yet Pius XV maintained deliberate public silence throughout the war and immediately afterward. Vatican documents reveal his private reasoning, fear of retaliation against Catholics and the Vatican itself. Pius worried that explicit condemnation would trigger Nazi persecution of German Catholics and potentially lead to invasion of Vatican City. His advisors pointed to Hitler's treatment of clergy in occupied territories as evidence that silence offered better protection. But Archbishop Sergio Pagano, Vatican Archive prefect for 45 years until 2024, calls this explanation fundamentally insufficient after reviewing the complete documentation. Pagano specifically questions Pius's continued silence even after. Germany's defeat eliminated any possibility of retaliation. Documents show Pius received increasingly urgent pleas from Jewish leaders and Allied officials to speak publicly about Nazi crimes. Rabbi Isaac Herzog appealed directly to the Vatican in 1943, begging papal intervention to save Hungarian Jews, the world Jewish. Congress provided detailed documentation of systematic murder in 1944. President Franklin Roosevelt's personal representative Myron Taylor presented comprehensive evidence of genocide in 1944. Yet papal public statements remained deliberately vague, referring only to innocent victims and those who suffer because of their nationality or race. Historians can't explain why Pius refused to speak specifically about Jewish persecution, even after Allied victory eliminated any threat of German retaliation. Private correspondence shows Pius understood the moral implications of his silence, but chose diplomacy over explicit condemnation. The silence extended beyond prudent wartime caution into apparent institutional indifference to Jewish suffering. Even more puzzling, recently released documents show Pius XV continued avoiding specific Holocaust references throughout the 1950s, when writing about war crimes and rebuilding Europe. His consistent pattern suggests something deeper than wartime: pragmatism. Number 12. The graffiti wall inscription, 160 AD discovery beneath St. Peter's Basilica. Vatican excavations between 1940 and 1949 uncovered an ancient wall covered with hundreds of Latin graffiti inscriptions directly adjacent to the alleged site of St. Peter's tomb. The wall stretches 15 meters in length and rises 3 meters high, completely covered with names, prayers, and invocations carved by early Christian pilgrims. One inscription clearly reads, Peter Vermoes and I, interpreted by Vatican archaeologists as Petrus Ani, or Peter is here. Additional inscriptions include Petre Rosa, Christu pro sanctis hominibus Christianis, Peter, pray to Christ for the holy Christian people, and dozens of abbreviated names invoking Peter's intercession. The wall dates definitively to the 2nd century based on surrounding archaeological evidence and inscription styles, making it potentially the earliest physical evidence of Christian veneration at this site. But surrounding context creates serious interpretative problems for Vatican claims. The same wall contains inscriptions referencing multiple individuals buried in the nearby necropolis: Gaius Valerius, Marcus Caecilius, and at least 30 other names of people clearly not St. Peter. The density of inscriptions suggests this was a general Christian memorial area rather than a specific apostolic tomb site. Archaeological dating techniques available in the 1940s were primitive compared to modern standards. No comprehensive epigraphic analysis was conducted using current paleographic methods that could precisely date individual inscriptions. The Vatican has systematically restricted access to the graffiti wall since its discovery, limiting scholarly examination to a handful of approved Catholic archaeologists. Independent research teams have never been permitted to study the site, using modern analytical techniques. Carbon dating of organic materials embedded in the wall mortar could clarify construction dates, but hasn't been authorized by Vatican officials who cite preservation concerns. Infrared photography might reveal additional inscriptions obscured by age or deliberate erasure, but such examination requires special permits rarely granted to external researchers. High-resolution 3D scanning could document every inscription for comprehensive study, but Vatican protocols limit such access. The inscription's specific context within the larger necropolis remains deliberately unexplored. Vatican excavations ceased abruptly in 1950, despite obvious archaeological potential in surrounding areas. Church officials declared the site sufficiently investigated and sealed access tunnels to prevent unauthorized exploration. Modern epigraphists studying available photographs note the Peter NNI inscription uses lettering styles that could date anywhere from 160 to 300 AD, a chronological range that encompasses the entire period when Christian pilgrimage to this site might have developed. The inscription might commemorate Peter's actual burial spot, or it could represent later Christian devotional graffiti added centuries after his death. Without comprehensive archaeological analysis using modern techniques, basic questions about Christianity's most important pilgrimage site remain unanswered after 75 years. In September 2023, Vatican workers discovered a previously unknown chamber while installing modern climate control systems in the archive's underground bunker beneath the Apostolic Palace. The sealed room, hidden behind a false wall since the 17th century, contained medieval documents wrapped in beeswax, apparently preserved during a forgotten fire. Initial examination revealed correspondence written in languages Vatican scholars couldn't immediately identify, possibly encrypted Latin mixed with Hebrew characters. Among the papers were letters bearing seals from religious orders that officially never existed according to Vatican records. The documents showed dates from the 13th century, but referenced events from different time periods, suggesting either deliberate historical forgery or knowledge that shouldn't have existed. Vatican officials immediately classified the discovery under pontifical secret, restricting access to a 3-person team of linguists sworn to silence. Preliminary translations reportedly revealed references to the true burial of the fishermen and what lies beneath the 7th level. Translation work continues in complete secrecy within a specially constructed chamber monitored by Swissy guard around the clock. Archbishop Pagano, speaking privately before his 2024 retirement, admitted the Vatican routinely discovers materials that challenge established historical narratives. When asked specifically about the September 2023 find, he would only say that some knowledge requires centuries of preparation before release. The chamber's existence raises fundamental questions about what other hidden rooms might exist beneath Vatican City. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted for construction projects consistently reveal void spaces that remain unexplored. Some mysteries never rest, especially when they're locked 85 kilometers deep in the world's most guarded archives. Every secret of a man's soul has its price.